Elliot McCann leaned back against the cold wall of Fire Station 4, wiping the sweat and soot from his neck with the edge of a dirty towel. The call they had just returned from had been minor, a kitchen fire in a duplex in northeast Portland, but even the easy calls left him drained these days. Portland's autumn had rolled in early that year. The rain hadn't stopped in almost 3 days, and the city was covered in a damp gray blanket that made everything feel heavier. The air smelled like wet asphalt, smoke, and exhaustion. Elliot, in his mid-30s, was what people called reliable. He wasn't flashy, didn't talk much, but in the field, no one moved faster. He carried a quiet strength, the kind that doesn't demand respect, but earns it anyway. He didn't have a wife or kids. His world revolved around 2 things: his job and the small fixer-upper he had been restoring on the east side for the past 5 years. It was a solitary life, but one he understood. That night, driving home in his truck, he felt the familiar pull of fatigue in his bones. He wasn't planning on stopping anywhere, but hunger and habit made him pull into a small burger joint a few blocks from his house. The place was nearly empty, only 2 teenagers inside, half asleep behind the counter. As he stepped out of the truck, a strange feeling came over him. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the way the rain had softened into a mist. But something felt wrong. He started walking toward the back entrance, thinking he might use the side window to place a quick order, something he'd done dozens of times before. That's when he saw it. A small shape, hunched near the dumpster, barely visible beneath an old, dirty blanket. At first, he thought it was a pile of trash, something forgotten or discarded. But then he heard it. Not a cry, not a scream, just a sound, a shallow, broken cough. Barely there. Elliot froze. He moved closer, stepping carefully, until he was standing directly over the bundle. What he saw made his breath catch in his chest. A child. A little girl, no older than 2. Her tiny fingers clutched the edge of the blanket. Her face was pale, cheeks flushed with fever. Her lips were cracked. Her eyes, wide, brown, glassy with sickness, looked up at him with a mix of fear and something worse, surrender. She didn't move, didn't cry. She just stared. "Hey," Elliot whispered, dropping to his knees. "Hey, sweetheart. It's okay. You're okay now." She didn't respond, didn't even blink. Her body was burning hot when he placed his hand on her forehead, and her clothes were soaked straight through. He didn't hesitate. He picked her up gently, pressing her against his chest, shielding her from the rain with his jacket as he rushed back to his truck. He didn't wait for an ambulance. He didn't even think. He just drove. At the emergency room, he handed her over to a nurse with trembling hands. "I found her behind a restaurant," he told them. "She was alone, freezing, sick. I don't know how long she was out there." Doctors and nurses sprang into motion. Machines beeped. Questions were asked. Police were called. But Elliot stayed. 4 hours. Even when they told him he didn't have to. Even when they said someone from Child Protective Services would take over. He stayed. The next morning, he returned with a small teddy bear he bought from the hospital gift shop. He didn't know if she'd be awake, didn't know if she'd remember him, but when he stepped into the pediatric room and saw her sitting up, pale, still weak, but alive, something clicked inside him. She looked at him, and for the first time she smiled. A nurse walked by and whispered, "She doesn't do that for just anyone." That became the start of something Elliot couldn't explain. A pull, a bond that deepened with every visit. He learned her name was unknown. No ID, no record. They called her Jane Doe in the paperwork. No family came forward. No reports matched her description. It was like she had been erased. He couldn't stop thinking about her. In bed, at work, while washing dishes, he saw her face. That smile. The way she had looked at him, like she had been waiting for him all along. By the third week, Elliot was attending every doctor's visit, reading to her in the evenings, learning her favorite snacks, holding her hand when she had nightmares, and slowly she began calling him Daddy. The social worker, a soft-spoken woman named Angela, pulled Elliot aside one afternoon. "She's attached to you in a way we don't see very often," she said. "Legally, she's still a ward of the state, but if you're thinking about long-term care, we could explore options." He didn't answer right away. The idea scared him, not because he didn't want it, but because he realized how much he already did. So Elliot took the classes. He filled out forms, let strangers inspect his home, dig into his past, ask hard questions. He passed everything: background checks, evaluations, psychological screenings. 9 months later, the state called him. The adoption was approved. He sat in the courtroom with her on his lap. She was wearing a yellow dress she'd picked out herself. She kept grabbing his tie and giggling. When the judge asked him if he understood the responsibilities of legal guardianship, if he accepted full parental rights, Elliot didn't hesitate. "I do," he said, "with everything I've got." He named her Eloan, a name he had once read in a book, soft and strong at the same time. And from that day on, she became Eloan McCann. People in the neighborhood noticed the change in him. He smiled more, talked more. His house, once too quiet, now echoed with laughter and footsteps and songs made up on the spot. He was a father, not by blood, but in every way that mattered. Elliot never asked where she came from. He figured the past would come knocking when it was ready. But for now, for those first golden years, it was just him and Eloan, side by side, heart to heart, and nothing else in the world even came close. If you like interesting stories, leave your like, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications to stay updated with all our content. And let us know in the comments where you're watching this video from. We'd love to hear from you. The phone call came on a Thursday afternoon. The sky over Portland was unusually clear, a break in the constant drizzle, and Elliot had just finished folding the laundry that Eloan always helped him mess up right after he folded it. She was 8 now, sharp, full of questions, and in that magical in-between age where her world was still small enough to be safe, but her thoughts were growing faster than he could keep up. She was at school, and the silence in the house felt off without her. Elliot glanced at the caller ID, expecting a routine work update or maybe something from the school. But what he saw stopped him cold. Department of Child Welfare, Portland Division. His breath caught. It had been years since he'd heard from them. Eloan's adoption had been finalized when she was barely 3, and every paper, every process had been put to rest. There was no reason for them to be calling now. "Still," he answered, steadying his voice. "Hello." The voice on the other end was calm, professional, but hesitant. "Mr. McCann, this is Lindsay Harrow. I'm a case coordinator with the Department of Child Welfare. I'm calling regarding Eloan." He didn't say anything, just listened, bracing. "There's been some new information," she continued. "We've recently been contacted by a man named Darian Caldwell. He's the biological uncle of Eloan on her mother's side. Until recently, he was unaware that she existed. He's reached out through formal channels and expressed interest in meeting her." Elliot didn't move. didn't speak. The words didn't make sense. 4 years, no one had come forward. No one had asked about her. No one had left so much as a message. Now that she had a life, a family, a home, Lindsay continued, carefully. We've verified the connection through DNA records. It appears legitimate. He and his wife live in Ashland. They have no criminal history, no prior involvement with child services. He's expressed that he doesn't want to disrupt anything. He just wants the chance to meet his niece, to know her. Elliot's voice was low, but firm. And you think that's a good idea? There was a pause. I think it's complicated, she admitted. But from a developmental perspective, it can be beneficial for adopted children to have access to their biological roots. We're not making any decisions without your input, of course. But we're asking that you consider a supervised visit. Just one. To gauge comfort levels. To give Eloan the opportunity to know where she comes from. That sentence, where she comes from, sliced right through him. She comes from here. From me. From every scraped knee I patched up, every nightmare I calmed, every birthday candle I helped her blow out. But Elliot didn't argue. Not yet. Because this wasn't a fight he knew how to win. This wasn't a fire he could just put out. He agreed to think about it. When he hung up, he didn't move for a long time. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at nothing, feeling something cold unravel in his chest. The silence in the house, once peaceful, now felt like a warning. That night, Eloan came home with a glitter-covered drawing of a unicorn and the biggest smile in the world. She dropped her backpack at the door, hugged him tight, and told him she was this close to being picked for the school spelling bee. Elliot watched her, heart breaking quietly inside his chest. He didn't tell her that night. Instead, he waited 3 more days, sitting on the decision like it might change if he held it long enough. But it didn't. The social worker followed up, politely, but clearly. The visit would be supervised, in a public setting. No commitments. Just introductions. So, finally, he sat Eloan down one evening after dinner, when she was curled up on the couch beside him with a blanket wrapped around her like a cocoon. "Elle," he said gently, "can we talk about something important?" She looked up, sensing the shift in his tone. "Is it bad?" No, he smiled, brushing her hair behind her ear. "It's just something new, something unexpected." He explained it the way only a father could, carefully, slowly, truthfully, but with protection in every word. He told her that someone from her birth family had reached out, an uncle, that he lived far away but wanted to meet her. Eloan didn't respond at first. She played with the edge of the blanket, thinking. Then she asked, "Does he know my mommy?" Elliot's voice caught in his throat. "He's her brother," he said. "So yes, he did." She nodded slowly. "Will you come with me?" "Of course I will," he said, without hesitation. "I'll be right there." And just like that, the decision was made. Not because Elliot believed in it, not because he trusted it, but because he loved her enough to risk his own peace of mind if it meant answering the questions that might one day grow too loud in her heart. The meeting was scheduled for the following week. As he watched her sleep that night, curled up with her old stuffed giraffe, breathing softly under the same quilt she'd had since she was 3, Elliot couldn't shake the feeling in his gut, the one that told him everything he loved most was about to change. Not in a dramatic, overnight kind of way, but slowly, quietly, like water under a door. And once it starts, there's no stopping it. The cafe was quiet that morning, too quiet for Elliot's nerves. He had arrived 20 minutes early, unable to sit still at home, pacing so much in the living room that even the dog had gotten tired of watching him. The place was a small, family-owned spot in downtown Portland, filled with the smell of fresh cinnamon rolls and espresso, the kind of warm, cozy atmosphere that usually put him at ease. But today, the air felt thick. Every creak of the door made his pulse jump. He sat at a table by the window, hands wrapped around a coffee he hadn't touched, eyes flicking toward the door every few seconds. Eloan sat across from him, her feet not quite touching the floor. She was wearing her favorite denim overalls and a purple hoodie, her hair pulled into two soft braids, one slightly messier than the other, the way she liked it. She was coloring quietly on a paper placemat, her crayon strokes calm, but Elliot could tell she was thinking hard. "Are they nice?" she asked without looking up. Elliot cleared his throat. "We'll find out together, all right?" She nodded once, then switched crayons. A few minutes later, the door opened, and this time Elliot knew it was them. Darian Caldwell walked in first. He was in his early 40s, tall, with dark blonde hair that had started to gray at the temples, and a jaw that looked like it belonged to someone who didn't smile very often. His clothes were neat: jeans, a tucked-in button-down, and a pair of polished brown boots that didn't fit the Oregon drizzle at all. There was a stiffness to his movements, like someone who hadn't quite figured out how to relax in unfamiliar spaces. Behind him came a woman, Marilee, shorter than her husband, with soft brown curls pulled into a bun and a cautious kindness in her eyes. She clutched her purse with both hands like a schoolgirl about to meet the principal. Elliot noticed her scanning the room, her gaze landing on Eloan almost instantly. Lindsay, the caseworker, was right behind them, clipboard in hand, greeting Elliot with a small nod as they approached. "Eloan," Lindsay said gently, "this is Darian and Marilee. They've been really looking forward to meeting you." The girl looked up, wide-eyed but curious. Darian bent slightly at the waist, not quite a full crouch, but enough to get closer to eye level. "Hi, Eloan," he said, voice deeper than Elliot expected. "I'm your Uncle Darian. You probably don't remember me, but I knew your mom when we were kids." Eloan blinked. "You're my mommy's brother?" "I am," he said softly. "You have her eyes." That made her glance toward Elliot, then back at Darian. Marilee stepped forward, her voice lighter, warmer. "And I'm Marilee. It's really, really nice to meet you, Eloan. We brought some pictures of our dog. His name's Rocket. He does this silly thing where he hides his toys in our laundry basket. You like dogs?" Eloan nodded, a smile breaking through. "I love dogs." Elliot watched the exchange, feeling both relief and something darker clawing at his chest. Jealousy wasn't the right word. It was fear, really. The fear of being outgrown, of being replaced, of watching something you built with your whole soul slowly drift away into someone else's hands. They all sat. Lindsay did her best to keep the mood light, asking Eloan about school, what she liked to read, what she wanted to be when she grew up. Elliot noticed how Marilee leaned in with genuine interest, laughing at Eloan's stories about a hamster from her science class. Darian was more reserved, but he asked questions. Good ones. Not too personal, not forced. Just enough to show he was trying. And Eloan? She blossomed. She talked, she giggled. She showed them the picture she had drawn on the placemat, a crooked rainbow with 5 stick figures underneath. Elliot, herself, Darian and Marilee, and a tiny blob with a tail. "That's Rocket," she explained proudly. By the time the visit ended, Elliot wasn't sure what to feel. It had gone better than he expected. Much better, actually. They hadn't said anything inappropriate, hadn't pushed, hadn't tried to claim her. But still, when they stood up and merrily reached out to hug Eloan, and Eloan let her. Elliot felt something unravel in his chest. She looked so small in Merrily's arms, but also not. There was a new light in her eyes, a sparkle that came from curiosity, from wonder, from a door opening to a part of herself she hadn't known existed. "I'm really glad we met," Merrily said, holding Eloan's hands. "Me too," she whispered. Elliot drove them home in silence for a while, the sound of the windshield wipers filling the truck. "Daddy," Eloan said softly, looking out the window, "do you think my mommy would have wanted me to meet them?" He hesitated, gripped the wheel tighter, then nodded. "I think your mom would have wanted you to feel loved by as many people as possible." She leaned her head on his arm. "I think they're nice," she said. "But you're my home." Elliot had to blink a few times to keep the road in focus. That night, she was quieter than usual. She didn't ask for a bedtime story, just climbed into bed and held his hand a little longer before falling asleep. And in the dark, Elliot sat on the edge of her bed for a long time, staring at the ceiling, wondering how many more pieces of her heart he'd have to share before he didn't recognize what was left for him. The first visit to Ashland happened on a Saturday. Elliot drove Eloan down himself, nearly 4 hours each way, the highway winding through thick Oregon forest, their usual road trip music playing low in the background. She sat in the back seat, legs swinging, hugging her backpack like it was a lifeline. Inside it, she had packed 2 books, her favorite plush giraffe, and a framed picture of her and Elliot that she'd insisted on bringing, just in case they don't have any pictures of me yet. It was a simple comment, innocent, even thoughtful, but it stuck with Elliot like a splinter under the skin. Ashland was charming. That irritated him more than he expected. It had cobbled streets, tall leafy trees just starting to turn orange, and tidy little houses lined up like something out of a storybook. Darian and Merrily's place was one of those. 2 stories, dark green shutters, wind chimes hanging on the porch, a tire swing in the front yard, flower boxes under every window. It didn't look like a place that held secrets or past mistakes. It looked like a place a child could fall in love with. And Eloan did. From the moment Rocket, a golden retriever with a red bandana and too much energy, barreled out the front door to greet her, Eloan lit up. She squealed with laughter, dropped her bag, and ran after the dog like they were lifelong friends. Elliot stood there on the porch, watching her run through the yard like she'd already been there a dozen times. Like it was nothing new. Like it was hers, too. "Hey!" Merrily greeted him gently, stepping outside with a mug in her hand. "We're really glad you made the drive. I know it's a lot." Elliot nodded. She wanted to come. Merrily hesitated. "You're welcome here, you know. To come in. See the space. We want you to feel comfortable too." He wasn't sure if she meant it, or if it was just something people said to be polite. But he accepted. Inside, the house was warm, full of wood tones and soft lighting. A fireplace crackled in the corner. Photos lined the walls. Vacations, family barbecues, childhood moments frozen in frames. There was even a small spot cleared on a bookshelf with a new frame waiting for a photo of Eloan. Her name was already printed on a little label underneath. Upstairs, there was a room. Her room. Not a guest room. Not a couch with a blanket. A real room. Painted soft blue. A twin bed with a comforter covered in stars and moons. Bookshelves filled with age-appropriate novels. A stuffed animal on the pillow. Even a desk with a little note on it. "Welcome, Eloan." He hadn't known they'd done all this. He hadn't been told they were preparing a space for her. That night, back in Portland, Elliot couldn't sleep. The memory of her smile in that yard, The way she ran through that house like she belonged there, looped in his mind. He kept seeing the way she laughed when Rocket licked her face. The way she asked, without hesitation, if she could stay just a little longer when it was time to go. It wasn't about losing her. Not yet. It was about the beginning of a shift, a slow, subtle change in her world that he couldn't control. And it kept happening. Every other weekend, they'd drive down. And then, slowly, it became every weekend. Darian and Marilee always invited Elliot in, always offered him coffee, dinner, a place to sit. Sometimes he stayed. Sometimes he didn't. There was a part of him that couldn't breathe in that house, not because it was wrong, but because it was too right. He started noticing small things. How Eloan packed her bag faster each time. How she began referring to Rocket as our dog. How her stories from Ashland grew longer and her stories from home grew shorter. She still hugged him just as tight when she returned, still crawled into his lap on the couch and asked him to make pancakes on Sunday mornings. But Elliot felt it, a slow drift, like a tide pulling out. One day, as he folded laundry in the living room, he overheard her on a video call with Marilee. "Guess what? I got an A on my book report," she beamed. "That's amazing, sweet pea. We're so proud of you." Marilee's voice replied. "We're." That one word hit harder than it should have. Later that night, Elliot sat in the dark living room, flipping through the photos on his phone. There were hundreds of Eloan, from toddlerhood to now, sleeping on his chest, blowing out birthday candles, swimming in the lake that summer. All those moments, frozen in time, clinging to a version of life he felt slipping away. He didn't say anything to her. He couldn't. She was happy. That was what mattered. But inside, Elliot was beginning to mourn something that wasn't gone yet, and maybe never would be completely. But it wasn't his alone anymore. And deep down he knew, this wasn't just a phase. This was the beginning of a life she'd live in two homes, and no matter how much he loved her, half of her heart was starting to grow roots somewhere else. The silence in Elliot's house began to feel heavier. It wasn't that Eloan was gone all the time. She still spent half her weeks there, still left drawings on the fridge and little socks under the couch, but her absence, when it came, settled over the rooms like fog. Thick, quiet, unshakable. The living room no longer echoed with her laughter. Her toothbrush still stood in its usual spot beside his, but he found himself glancing at it longer than he should. Her cereal sat untouched in the pantry. Her nightlight glowed uselessly each evening, waiting for footsteps that didn't come. It was like living with a shadow, not of Eloan herself, but of the time when she had been his whole world, undivided, uncomplicated, completely his. Elliot was careful not to show it. He still smiled when she FaceTimed from Ashland to show him a drawing, or a new silly thing Rocket had done. He still told her he missed her and loved her and was proud of her, all the things a good father is supposed to say. But inside, something was unraveling. The firehouse became his refuge. The routine, the movement. At least there, everything made sense. Emergencies had rules, protocol, a rhythm you could fall into. You knew what to do with fire: attack it, smother it, contain it. But how do you contain a quiet fear? How do you fight something that doesn't announce itself, that creeps into your home in the form of half-packed backpacks and new routines that don't include you? One night, after a particularly long shift, Elliot sat on the firehouse steps with his best friend, Hank, a fellow firefighter with a busted knee and a loud laugh that could echo down the block. Hank was the only person Elliot ever talked to about real things. They'd been through fires, near-deaths, and late-night rescues together. But this wasn't something you pulled someone out of. This was slower, internal. "You're off," Hank said, handing Elliot a cold beer. "Want to talk about it or sit here in manly silence for the next hour?" Elliot cracked the can open. "She's spending more time down there," he said after a moment. "With them?" Hank nodded. "The uncle?" "Yeah. And Marilee. They're good people. Nice house. Clean. Organized. Room just for her. Big backyard. A dog. They check all the boxes. But..." Elliot took a long sip. "I think she likes it there more." Hank didn't say anything at first. Then, "She's 8, man. She probably likes cereal more than dinner too. Doesn't mean she's done with you." "It's not that," Elliot said, quieter now. She's changing. I see it. The way she talks about them. The way she lights up. I don't know. What if she decides that's where she belongs? What if one day she stops calling this home?" Hank gave him a long look. "You really think love works like that?" Elliot didn't answer. Because love, at least the kind he felt for Eloan, wasn't about logic. It was about vulnerability. About holding someone so close that the thought of losing them feels like drowning in dry air. He couldn't admit it to anyone, not even Hank, but at night, Elliot had started checking the old adoption papers. Not because he thought they would be taken away. They were legal, solid, final. But because part of him feared that being a father on paper wasn't the same as being one in her heart. And that was the heart he feared losing. One afternoon, during a rare break in the rain, Elliot found himself alone in Eloan's room. He wasn't sure why he walked in. He never did when she was gone. It felt wrong, like trespassing. But something drew him there. The bed was neatly made, the way Marilee had shown her to do. Tucked corners, no toys on the sheets. There was a drawing on the nightstand of a house split in half. One side labeled Dad's, the other Ashland. She'd drawn herself in both. It should have brought comfort. It didn't. He sat on the edge of her bed, hands clasped, elbows on knees. And for the first time since he'd found her behind that burger joint all those years ago, Elliot felt like maybe he wasn't enough. Not because he didn't love her, but because love, when shared, begins to feel fragile, like maybe it can be outgrown, or misplaced, or slowly pulled apart. He stared at the drawing for a long time, then folded it carefully, put it in his wallet, and left the room. Because even when the fear claws at your ribs, even when you feel like you're standing on the edge of losing everything you love most, you still show up. You still make her pancakes. You still answer her video calls with a smile. You still wait at the door every Friday, hoping the part of her that calls you Dad never starts to fade. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Eloan came home with a new teddy bear tucked under her arm, a soft, fluffy thing with caramel-colored fur, button eyes, and a stitched red scarf around its neck. She carried it like it was made of glass, delicate and precious, hugging it tightly with both arms as she walked through the door. Elliot had just gotten home from the fire station. He was still in his uniform shirt, sleeves rolled up, face tired but warm. When she stepped into the living room, beaming, he immediately smiled, reflexively, instinctively. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, setting his keys on the table. "What's this little guy's name?" Eloan spun the bear around, showing him the stitched name on the scarf. "Mr. Cuddles." "Cute," he said, crouching to her level. "New friend." "Aha," she chirped. "Nana gave him to me." Elliot froze for a moment, just enough for her to notice. "Nana?" he asked, keeping his voice light. "Marilee's mom," Eloan explained, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "She said she's my other grandma now. Isn't that cool?" She smiled so brightly, so innocently, that it took every ounce of strength Elliot had not to let it show. The crack, the shift, the way his heart clenched like someone had reached into his chest and twisted something vital. He nodded, swallowing the knot in his throat. "Yeah," he said. "That's really cool." She didn't notice his pause. She was too busy setting Mr. Cuddles up on the couch, tucking him in with a throw pillow and pretending he was sleeping. Elliot watched her, every movement small but weighted. He didn't know why the bear bothered him so much. It was just a toy, just a gift. But something about it, the way it came into his home without warning, the way it seemed to represent a version of family that was quietly forming around her, expanding and evolving without him, made him feel like a guest in his own life. Later that evening, as Eloan got ready for bed, she insisted that Mr. Cuddles sleep right in the middle of the pillow. Not beside her, but between her and the wall, like a boundary had been placed, soft and smiling. Elliot kissed her forehead, adjusted the blankets, and turned off the light. But long after she fell asleep, he stood in the hallway, staring at the closed door, trying to explain to himself why he felt so removed. It wasn't just the bear. It was the name, Nana, the casual way Eloan had said it, like it had always been there, like it didn't need explanation or approval, like love, even grandmotherly love, could appear out of nowhere and plant itself right into her vocabulary, into her heart, into the space Elliot had fought so hard to protect. He sat in the kitchen that night, lights off, listening to the humming of the refrigerator. He opened his phone, scrolled through photos of Eloan's first Christmas, the time they camped out in the backyard under the stars, the day she learned to ride a bike, scraped knees and all. He remembered how she used to say, "You're the only family I've got, Daddy." It was a sentence she hadn't said in over a year, not because she didn't mean it anymore, but because it wasn't true anymore, and that hurt more than he ever expected it would. 2 days later, at school drop-off, Eloan waved to him from the car window. Mr. Cuddles was buckled into the seat beside her, wearing a tiny paper crown she had made in art class. "He's part of the family now," she said, grinning. "He's never alone." Elliot smiled, waved back, but the truth sank like stone in his chest. He knew what she meant. She was building a bigger world, and though he would always be part of it, he was no longer the whole thing. If you're enjoying this story, leave your like, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications to stay updated with all our content. It started with a text. Simple, polite, almost innocent. "Hey Elliot, any chance we could talk? Just a quick thing. Coffee. Darian." Elliot stared at the screen for a while, thumb hovering over the reply. He didn't like texts like that, vague, open-ended. They always meant something more. He could feel it. The shift. The tension tightening in his chest like the air before a storm. He replied, "Sure. Saturday morning." They met at a park near the edge of Portland. Neutral ground. Trees mostly bare from the early December cold. Ducks gliding over the grey pond water. The air carried that sharp chill that makes people keep their hands in their pockets, their voices low. Darian was already there when Elliot arrived, pacing slowly near the bench by the water. He turned when he saw him, offered a tight smile. "Thanks for meeting," he said, hands stuffed deep into his jacket. Elliot nodded. "What's on your mind?" Darian hesitated, looked at the ground, then at the water. He wasn't a nervous man, Elliot could tell. He was someone used to being in control. This discomfort wasn't his default. That made Elliot listen more closely. "I've been thinking," Darian started, "about Eloan, about what this all means long-term." Elliot said nothing, but his jaw tightened. Darian continued, "Marilee and I, we've been talking with her, spending time. She's amazing, you know that. And she's comfortable with us. More than we ever expected in such a short time. She talks to us. She trusts us. Elliot's shoulders stiffened. She's a child. She trusts easily. I know, Darian said, not flinching. But the bond is real. We're not trying to replace you, Elliot. That's not what this is. Then what is this? Elliot asked. Darian exhaled hard, bracing himself. We'd like to propose a more consistent arrangement. One where Eloan spends alternate weeks with us in Ashland. The words hung in the air like smoke. Elliot blinked. Weeks. It would give her stability in both homes, Darian continued calmly. She already has a room, a school she can attend when she's with us. We've looked into enrollment options. There's a small elementary school just down the road. Very gentle transition. And Marilee's mother can help when needed. Elliot's mind reeled. His voice, when it came, was quiet but hard. So you've planned all of this without talking to me first? No, Darian said quickly. We haven't made any moves. We just wanted to come to you first. Respectfully. Because we know what you mean to her. Elliot turned his head, staring out at the pond, his hands clenched into fists in his coat pockets. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't cause a scene. But something broke inside him. This isn't shared custody, he said. This is the beginning of splitting her life in half. Of putting distance where there doesn't need to be any. She already has 2 lives, Darian replied, gently but firmly. You know that. You're feeling it. We all are. Eloan's not just yours anymore. And you're not just hers. That's not a betrayal, Elliot. It's just reality. Elliot looked down at the gravel beneath his boots. He felt the heat rising in his chest, not from anger, but from something worse, helplessness. She's 8, Elliot said quietly. She still calls the crust on her sandwiches, the yucky part, and you want her switching houses every week like it's normal. We're just asking, Darian said. No court, no pressure. Just think about it, please. He extended a piece of paper from his coat, a printed outline of a suggested schedule, color-coded days, logistics, contacts. Elliot didn't take it. He stood still for a long moment, then finally looked Darian in the eyes. Do you love her? Darian blinked, caught off guard. Yes, of course I do. Then don't pull her apart, Elliot said, voice low. She's not a rope. She's a little girl. She needs one home, not a calendar. And without another word, he turned and walked away. That night, Elliot stood in the hallway outside Eloan's room, listening to her soft breathing. She was curled up with Mr. Cuddles again, one hand beneath her cheek, the other stretched toward the edge of the bed, as if reaching for something even in sleep. He sat on the floor outside her door, back against the wall, heart pounding, because deep down, he knew what was happening. They weren't taking her by force. They were just inviting her into a world where his presence could slowly fade. No battles, no courts, just quiet distance, dressed up in logic and kindness. And that was harder to fight than anything he'd ever faced. The first week without her felt like someone had stolen the sound from Elliot's world. It wasn't just that the house was quiet, it was still, too still, as if every corner of it was waiting for Eloan to come running back. Her shoes were still by the door. Her toothbrush still leaned against his in the bathroom. Her cereal bowl sat in the sink for 2 days before he could bring himself to wash it. The days dragged. Elliot poured himself into the fire station. He volunteered for extra shifts, took late-night calls no one else wanted, hauled gear, climbed ladders, faced flames like they owed him something. But even the fire wasn't loud enough to drown the absence. He thought he could handle it, that he could be the kind of father who did the right thing even when it hurt, especially when it hurt. He told himself it was just a trial, a test. 1 week on, 1 week off. People did it every day. Kids adjusted. Parents survived. But this didn't feel like survival. It felt like watching his life happen without him. Eloan called every night. And every night, her voice made him ache with something he couldn't explain. "Rocket keeps trying to eat my socks," she laughed once. "Marilee says it's his way of saying he missed me." Another night, "They let me help make spaghetti. Nana said I'm a natural in the kitchen." Then, "I hung up our picture in my room here. The one where I have cake on my nose and you're pretending not to laugh." Elliot smiled through the phone. Always. But when the call ended, he sat in the dark with his face in his hands, struggling to hold it together. The week crawled by. And then, finally, it was Friday. He left work early, cleaned the house top to bottom, washed her sheets, bought the cereal she liked with the mini marshmallows, set out her drawing pads on the coffee table, turned on her favorite playlist in the car. He pulled up outside the meeting point, heart racing like he was seeing her for the first time. And when she saw him, really saw him, she ran. She dropped her bag, her jacket half off, her little boots pounding the pavement. "Daddy!" she shouted, leaping into his arms so fast that he staggered back a step. He wrapped her up, holding her so tight he could barely breathe. She smelled like shampoo and crayons and the world he'd been missing all week. "I missed you so much," she said into his neck. "I missed you more," he whispered, eyes wet. They drove home with the windows cracked open, her singing softly to the music, hand in his. That night, as she unpacked her things, Elliot noticed something. She brought fewer toys back now, fewer clothes, a new toothbrush, a second set of pajamas she kept at Marilee's house. She was dividing her world, not out of rebellion, not even on purpose. It was just happening. Later, after dinner, they sat on the couch, watching an old movie they'd seen a dozen times. Eloan leaned against him, her head resting on his chest. "Can I tell you something?" she asked. "Always. I like both houses," she said carefully, as if testing the words. "They're really different. But it's okay, right? To like both." Elliot kissed the top of her head. "Of course it's okay. I still love you the same," she whispered. That nearly undid him. He didn't reply. He just held her closer. But inside, he was starting to understand something brutal. It wasn't about whether she loved him less. It was about learning to live with the fact that love, sometimes, had to stretch across zip codes. That bedtime stories had to wait 7 days. That someone else might be the one to braid her hair for picture day. That even if she still called him Dad, she might start calling someone else something close enough to echo. And somehow, he had to learn to carry that. To stay steady. To not show her how much it cost him to smile through the letting go. Because that's what love was, in the end. Letting go, a little more each time, without making the child feel the weight of what they're carrying away. The question came on a grey Sunday afternoon. The kind of afternoon where the sky hangs low, the wind moves the trees just enough to rattle windows, and everything in the house feels a little quieter than usual. Elliot was in the kitchen, slicing apples for a pie, Eloan's favorite, while she sat at the table, coloring with quiet focus. She hadn't said much all day. Not unhappy, not restless, just thoughtful, watching the rain through the window, pressing her finger against the glass and tracing patterns. Then, without turning around, she asked, "Why isn't my mom with me?" The knife in Elliot's hand stopped halfway through the apple. He didn't speak right away. He didn't even breathe for a few seconds, because he'd always known this moment would come, but no amount of preparation could have made it easier. He dried his hands on a towel and walked over slowly, pulling out the chair beside her. Eloan was still coloring, but her crayon moved slower now. He sat, leaned forward, and said her name gently. "Elle." She stopped. Her eyes met his, wide, searching, unblinking, and just like that, the moment was no longer distant. It was here. Elliot nodded to himself, like giving silent permission to speak. "I don't know everything," he began quietly, "but I know enough to tell you the truth." She didn't say a word, just listened. "Your mom, she loved you," he said. "I believe that. Deep down, I really do. But she had a hard time. With life. With choices. With things that hurt her." Eloan tilted her head. "Was she sick?" "In a way, yeah," Elliot replied. "She struggled with substances. With the kind of pain that doesn't always show on the outside. And sometimes, when people are hurting like that, they can't take care of others, even when they want to. She was quiet for a long time. Then, did she leave me?" The question came out smaller than her usual voice, like she was bracing for the worst. "No," Elliot said quickly, firmly. "No, baby. She didn't leave you. She just couldn't stay. Not the way a mom is supposed to. But it wasn't because of you. Not even a little." He reached out and took her hand. "I found you because she didn't have the strength to protect you the way she wanted to. And I know, if she could have been the kind of mom you needed, she would have been." Eloan blinked fast, then looked down at her drawing. "Did she name me?" Elliot felt his throat tighten. "No. You didn't have a name when I met you. Then how did I get mine?" "I gave it to you," he said softly. Eloan means elm tree in an old language. Strong roots, gentle leaves, beautiful and growing. She looked at him again, this time with a strange mix of sadness and wonder. "So you picked it just for me?" "Just for you," he nodded. "Because you were mine from the moment I saw you. Before a judge said it. Before the paperwork. I knew." Her voice was barely a whisper now. "But she was still my first mom." Elliot nodded. "Yes. And I'm your dad. Not by accident. By choice. Every single day." She didn't cry. Neither did he. She just leaned over and wrapped her arms around him. Small and tight and full of something heavier than a child should have to carry, but somehow she held it without crumbling. "I love you, Daddy," she said into his shoulder. "I love you more," he whispered back. That night, she asked him to tell her a story before bed, one he used to tell her when she was little, about a girl and her invisible dragon friend who flew across cities at night. She didn't ask about her mother again. Not that night. Not for a while. But something changed after that conversation. She looked at him differently, not with less love, but with deeper understanding, as if some invisible curtain had been pulled back, and she saw the full shape of her life for the first time. She started asking more about when she was a baby, where they lived, what songs he used to sing. She dug through old photos and asked who took them, and when, and how he felt in each one. And Elliot answered every question, no matter how painful, because now The truth wasn't something to shield her from. It was something she was strong enough to hold. And she was so strong, stronger than he'd ever known. And through it all, the shifts, the silence, the splitting of her world into two, he realized something he hadn't been sure of before. She knew where her roots were, even if her branches reached toward new skies. And if you liked this story, you'll surely love the next one appearing on your screen. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, leave your like, and turn on notifications. See you next time.